A quick new idea, daily, from the world's greatest TEDx talks. I'm your host, Atossa Leoni, and this is TEDx Shorts. What are your blind spots? We all have areas in our lives in which our vision is obstructed and our judgment impaired. Today's speaker is concerned that technology is making matters worse by spreading these blind spots to more people, much faster, and with serious consequences. Tristan Harris is a design thinker and ethicist who's been working in Silicon Valley to implement more ethical frameworks into technology. And in today's talk, he suggests, we acknowledge our blind spots by putting them at the center of our institutions to foster more humane choices.
First, if I tell you, don't think of an elephant, and just tell yourself, don't think of an elephant, immediately your mind sort of automatically thinks of an elephant, right? So it turns out there's this study done that 70% of Facebook users actually only read the headline of science stories before commenting. But the even funnier thing about this story is that the actual remainder of this story was filled with Latin nonsense. And it was a test to see how many people would share it. Sort of a joke on the whole thing, except the thing is that this is actually our daily internet life. 6 out of 10 links on the internet are shared without ever having been clicked. In other words, people are more likely to have shared an article than to have read it. So we're basically spreading our blind spots all around and having these things spread. And now it might seem small, but if you actually bubble it all the way up to the top of Facebook, Facebook fired its entire human editorial news team. There used to be a team of people working at Facebook who checked the headlines and said, is there anything inappropriate that we should monitor? And they fired that team and they let an algorithm run what should be seen. And what they found was that the algorithm saw things just like we do, that the more people share something means it's at the top. And the number one story that day was a totally fabricated story that had no bearing in reality. And if you think about this for a second, the number one news source for 40% of the American population in an election year is Facebook. So do we want things that just see things by how we share them, what gets shared the most, to be the way we see our world? Or make a concrete example, in medicine, we have more medical technology and surgery and knowledge than we've ever had before. And at the same time, human errors still persist. So this is totally in our blind spot. If you had another public issue of concern, and let's say you were a business and you didn't want people to know about it, what would you do if there's some big public issue? Well, one strategy you can use, almost like a magician would think, is you can cast doubt about an issue. And you can say, well, the science isn't really clear, the jury's still out, it's controversial, we don't really know yet, right? This is a strategy, and in fact, this is the exact strategy that the tobacco company used, saying that doubt is our product, since it is the best means of competing with the body of fact that exists in the minds of the general public. So these things work, and they're not changing, because while all of this other stuff gets better, the human condition stays the same. And no amount of technology can hide that. So one of my favorite media theorists is Neil Postman, and he wrote this in the 1980s. There is no escaping from ourselves. The human dilemma is as it has always been, and we solve nothing fundamental by cloaking ourselves in technological glory. Now, I am a technologist. I actually believe a lot in the power of technology, but the reason I wanted to talk about this topic is because if we strap technology onto our blind spots, then we end up with the kinds of things that we're seeing here. And so I wanted to talk about 2 reasons why this matters now. So if we've always had blind spots, we've always had them, they're part of our nature, why should we care about them now, right? We've always had marketing and advertising, we've always had these tactics. Well, the 2 reasons are that the consequences are getting bigger, right? Big issues in society are actually stopped by our inability to call out these kinds of tactics as they're being used. And the second issue is that it's as if we're plugging our technology, we're plugging our blind spots into the amplifier that is our technology. So we're spreading our blind spots around, and we can't see what we can't see at a massive scale. So I think that this signals a kind of new period of human development and human history, in the sense that if we have human beings growing up from this whole lineage, and we had the Enlightenment in which we put all new authority in daring to know, we essentially put authority in the power of the human mind. We said individuals, the power of the individual to choose their life, to make choices, to use reason. And that got us really far. I don't want to discount that. That's an amazing thing. But what we're coming up against is essentially the limits of reason itself. We're coming up against the limits of our own instrument, of our own mind. And what I'd like to talk to you about today is why we need to dare to know ourselves. And not just that we're bigger and better and we stand taller, but we actually look back at what we are and see ourselves honestly for the little tiny mistakes and quirks that we have. And I think this involves also having a new identity as a person. Almost like, I became sort of a vegetarian recently, and that moment when you think of yourself as a vegetarian, you actually think of yourself in a different way. I think we need to think of ourselves as being built into our nature is that there are things that we don't see that we're not seeing. Now, what would that do? Well, today we have this blind spot-based world. And imagine if instead of that, beyond that, we focused on creating an anti-blind world. I don't mean anti-blind like against. I mean anti-blind by putting blind spots at the center of how we design all of our institutions, by putting blind spots at the center of what we want our world to look like and acknowledging our true nature. And not just in a negative way, but actually to help us see all the things that we can't see. So what would that look like? Well, one of my favorite metaphors for this is actually a blind spot mirror in a car. When we have these things, we acknowledge that there's something we don't see that we don't see. And we put it right there. And it requires not just this, but also that the person knows this, right? We all accept that there's just things we don't see that we don't see. But imagine we could instrument our whole environment to do this for ourselves everywhere. And it would be an empowering thing.
Tristan Harris is co-founder and director of the Center for Human Technology, with the goal of realigning technology with humanity. The TEDx talk you just listened to was recorded at a TEDx event in San Francisco, California. All TEDx events are independently organized by volunteers who believe in TED's mission of ideas worth spreading. Special thanks to the organizing team at TEDxSanFrancisco. Want to listen to the full talk? Find Tristan's talk and more at ted.com/TEDxShorts. I'm Atossa Leoni. Thanks for listening, and see you tomorrow.